Representative Dush.
Thank you, Chairman. Deputy Secretary Hudson, I have a feeling I know the answer to this, but I want to clarify it. The Department of Corrections numbers on your appendix, does that include PREA, or is that the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or is that just staff or employees on employees?
I'm not aware of the acronym you just shared, so I believe it's just their employee liability.
All right. Second, the posting of employees' rights, usually they have to be posted, and I was just curious, I know public sector employees, we do have some of the sexual harassment, employee right kind of things. Does that also apply in the private sector? Do you know under the current statutes?
I know. Mr. Hardman would know too. Yeah, yes, there is a if you're talking about posters to yes. Post rights, yes, there is a requirement, a state and federal requirement to post employee rights in a conspicuous place so that employees know their rights under state and federal law. And there are some little quirks about employees that work remotely and how you get them noticed. But basically, yes, there are poster requirements. Most employers that I know, without mentioning any company names, will literally call a company that provides human resources posters and pay $70 or $80 for a big laminated poster and stick it up in the lunchroom or someplace like that. So,
and Mr. Hardiman, do you guys have a public relations thing out there in order to try and get that kind of information out to where the general public is actually aware that these things?
We do, and we do that, first of all, on the Commission's website, which has all of that information is provided, including the requirement under the statute to have that notice posted. We also conduct training sessions across the Commonwealth to let people know what their rights are and what their responsibilities are.
It might be a good idea to try and get that so that whenever somebody Googles that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that it's one of the top rated hits, so that the people actually are very quickly aware of that.
Great
I think
idea.
that might be a good way to go for the Commission.
Thank you for that.
And lastly, having been an investigator as well as a supervisor, it's actually had to handle a couple of these things. Back in the 80s, we didn't have the type of policies in place with the Air Force that we do now, but when you do have a false claim, which is one of the things I dealt with back then, it was as a supervisor, you were the one that did the investigation, the initial investigation, and in this case, the woman forgot the fact that there was actually recordings, so she quickly ended up dropping the situation. But then there are others where the investigators right now, I want to just, from your perspective, Mr. Torchia, are there, with the Me Too movement, is there pressure to lean more towards one side or the other as a result of this? Tainting the investigation is my big thing. If we're going to do this, the best thing, like you said, having the investigator separate from the decision-making process is a very important step. But I just want to make sure that from your professional experience, we're not seeing public pressure influence, rather the facts.
Right. I have not seen public pressure to lean one way or the other. Those of us who conduct independent investigations take our job very seriously, that we're independent. It's also interesting, too, that very often from the claimant side or the plaintiff or the employee side, the investigated community, we're often accused of being really just hired by the employer, of course, because we are hired by the employer or the employer's attorneys, so they think that we're biased for the employer. But you might be surprised at how often the employer is rooting for an investigation that shows that the employee actually did something wrong. There are many times there are internal political issues where they can't terminate someone or take discipline against an employee, but armed with a report from an investigator, an independent third party, they can go and they say, okay, now we can suspend that person, now we can terminate that person. So the point is, going into an investigation, I rarely know which way, quote unquote, the employer would like it to turn out. I always know which way the victim would like it to turn out, but I rarely can really figure out in the beginning how the employer wants it to turn out.
Well, having been a private investigator before doing defense work, I understand where you're coming from, and that's one of the things I wanted to make sure we were still keeping a kind of a separation there, so that it's down to the facts rather than political pressure.
Any bias, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.